This teaching, I was actually inspired by an acronym that I had gotten from spiritual master Sai Baba in connection to watches. So watch, WATCH, is watch your words, watch your actions, watch your thoughts, watch your character, and watch your heart. And so it's just this way of having a walking meditation around the intention of compassion. And so I took that teaching and just shifted it a bit to make it really Love Coach Academy appropriate. So with that, do you want to bring up the teaching and we'll go into the first piece?
Yeah, one thing for anybody who's new to Zoom, we've got a couple people who might be new to it. In the upper right-hand corner, you can choose speaker view or gallery view. And we always encourage gallery view so you can see everybody. We will be, especially since it's an intimate group, we'll be opening it up to thoughts and questions. And I will mute you or unmute you. And there's a chat box down. If you take your cursor all the way down to the bottom, just a teeny bit to the right, there's a chat box, and you can message everyone. I just said aloha to everyone in honor of, I got to spell it correctly. So you can message each other, or you can message individuals. Where it says everyone, if you click on that, like let's say you want to just message Laura or Katrina or myself, just click the person you want to message to, and then it's a private message to that particular person. So the chat box is a nice thing to appreciate each other. If somebody shares, it's always nice to acknowledge their sharing. So just want you guys to know about upper right-hand corner, you can choose gallery view or speaker. Middle down, chat. And if you really need to mute or unmute yourself, that's in the lower left-hand corner, although I'll be serving to mute and unmute you guys as we call upon you. And I will now bring up our document. Okay, how is that? Is everybody able to read that okay? See it okay? Awesome, I'm seeing thumbs up, that's great. You know, these are foundational tools for Love Coach Academy, but they're really foundational tools for compassionate communication, or we like to call it compassionate connections. And I'm going to talk about thoughts, and then Katrina's going to talk about feelings and needs. And the most important thing I can say about thoughts is that our thoughts are highly suspect. Our thoughts are filled with prejudice, limited information, our own personal bias, our veils of past pain. And as a coach, I've really learned that most of the time when a person's unhappy, they're actually unhappy because they are in reaction to one of their own thoughts. It may be a thought about the world. Oh my God, what did Donald Trump do today? It might be a thought about their life. Oh my God, my life isn't working. It often is a recurring thought. I'm going to come back actually to myself so you can see me. It's often a recurring thought. When somebody says something that really hurts us or scares us, we'll replay that thought through our mind over and over and over. And the thing that's important to know is that when we're running thoughts that are painful, we trigger our own reptile brain. Just by remembering when she said that thing to me, or when I am thinking about that horrible thing that's happening in the world, I trigger my own reptile brain. What's that mean? Well, when we perceive the possibility of attack, our reptile brain sends a synapse throughout our body, and we pretty much have three choices: fight, flight, or freeze. And most of the time, we're in reptile brain based on our own thoughts. And so what's remarkable is if we want to control our life and control the way we feel, we actually need to control our thoughts. And I'm going to take you through a little practice as a demonstration for that. So I'd like for all of you to think of a painful thought that you've been running recently. You're not going to share this with the group. You're not going to share it with anybody. So you're going to keep it to yourself. So go ahead and pick the most painful thought you can remember that you've been running in your life recently. I want to welcome Paul Sterling and Wendy Mendoza and Sharon Hinckley. I love you, Sharon. Yay. Sharon has done this practice. The last time we counted 1,642 times. So thank you for being willing to do it again, Sharon. Welcome, Michaelia. So since we have a few people that just joined us again, I'm going to just repeat the practice. We're just starting a new practice. Welcome, Terry. Glad you're with us. I'm going to ask all of you to think of a painful thought that you've been running through your mind recently. And again, you're not going to share it with anybody. So this is just between you and yourself. So pick a painful thought. And we're going to work with that thought for a little while. So pick a painful thought you've been running through your mind recently. Does anybody need more time to pick their thought? Okay. Please close your eyes. And I'd like for you to run that thought slowly through your mind between 3 and 6 times. And as you do that, notice if there's any corresponding place in your body, maybe a place in your body that begins to hurt or contract. So running the painful thought through your mind and noticing how your body reacts. Noticing how your body responds or reacts, if there's discomfort or contraction. And after you've done this a few times, you can slowly open your eyes and come on back. I'm not going to call on anybody right now, but I'm just curious by raise of hands, who noticed at least one place in their body where there began to be discomfort or a contraction in relation to the thought? Okay, just about all of us. When I do this practice, and I do this at almost every introductory class that I teach, I'd say about 90% of the people notice a place in their body that begins to hurt or contract when they run that painful thought. Now, I'm going to give you 2 phrases, which I'm going to suggest that you write down. So either grab a piece of paper and a pen, or open up a little doc on your computer. They're both short phrases of about 5 or 6 words. But just be prepared to write these down. The first phrase to write down is, I am telling myself that, ... I am telling myself that, ... The second phrase I'm suggesting that you write down is, I am in my story that, ... I am in my story that, ... So we've got, I am telling myself that, and we've got, I'm in my story that. Now here's what we're going to do. We are going to run this little practice again. You're going to run that painful thought another 5 or 6 times. But this time you're going to choose one of those 2 phrases and you're going to put it at the start of your thought. If your thought was about another person, she doesn't love me, he doesn't respect me, he'll never change, you might want to go with, I am telling myself that she doesn't love me. I'm telling myself that he will never change. If your painful thought was more of a story about yourself, I weigh too much, I'll never get a good job, I'm not smart enough, I'll never find true love, then I'd suggest that you go with, I'm in my story that I weigh too much. I'm in my story that I'll never find true love. I'm in my story that I'm not good enough. Okay? So pick just one of those 2 phrases, whichever one kind of lands for you. And again, we're going to close our eyes. And you're going to run those thoughts, but you're going to put the phrase at the start of thought each time. So it's the phrase into the thought, phrase into the thought, phrase into the thought. Is that clear to everybody? Okay, let's close our eyes. Oh, and again, as you're running the phrase and the thought, notice again how your body responds and see if there's a difference in your body, if your body responds differently this time. Phrase in the thought, phrase in the thought, noticing how your body responds. And after you've done this and kind of noticed your body, go ahead and open your eyes and come on back into the room with us. Okay. Again, I'm not going to call on anybody yet, but I do want to ask, just by a raise of hands, who noticed a difference between the first time and the second time? Who noticed a difference? Wow, looks like just about all of us. Again, usually about 90% of the time people notice a difference. About 10% of the time people don't. And if you don't, try it again a few times. Who noticed a difference in their body, how their body responded? Okay, now I'd love to open it up to anybody who'd like to share about the difference. You don't have to tell us what the painful thought was, just telling us what the difference was between the first time and the second time. Who'd be willing to share that? Anybody willing to be brave and kind of share the difference? Oh, great. Lusana and then Judy. Lusana, you're unmuted.
Thank you. Aloha, everyone. What I noticed was that in choosing the phrase, everything slowed down. It like I was aware I'm doing the thinking, whereas before I had how many phrases just flooding my mind. And then because there were many phrases, there's like a string of, the story is long. I also realized that the change in my body, with one particular one, it didn't change. It was like I noticed, oh, I'm still having that same reaction in my body. So I played with that to see, well, can I see more deeply this is my story? And that I adopted it from wherever I adopted it, but I adopted it, and it's a story. And there was a slight decrease in the bodily reaction to that particular phrase. The other ones, there was a big change, again, because of the slowing down and the conscious awareness, I'm thinking this. Whereas before, when you asked it, it just felt like the barrage came, like a tsunami of thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being the first person to share with us, and it was really valuable. Thank you. Judy, you're unmuted and would love to hear what happened for you.
Yeah, it just felt like it was very surface. It wasn't deep. Whatever reaction was very mild. Before I felt like a sinking, and this was just a very light response.
Right. So you were able to relax, and it didn't grab you as much. It didn't take hold of you the way it had before.
Exactly.
Great. Thank you for sharing that, Judy. And it's good to have you with us. Thank you. How about one more person willing to share? One more person willing to share what was different for them? Thank you, Coach Linda.
You can just call me Linda. That's on there for my clients. Thanks, God. I felt a lot of intense contraction, especially in my solar plexus, my power center, and lower in my stomach. And then afterward, I kept trying to see if I could feel something, and I just felt super calm.
Yeah. Nice. Nice. So as you see, everybody's responses vary. I literally have led this for thousands of people, and it always varies, but usually people realize, oh, wow, it's a thought. It's not necessarily reality. And usually the body relaxes more. That's the kind of the most common response. And sometimes all of a sudden people realize, oh, wow, I'm just in my story. Now, when we use the word story, it doesn't necessarily mean it's a fiction. If you lost your job, you really lost your job. But when we call it a story, it's when the meaning that we assign to the event, the meaning or the interpretation we assign to what's happened in our life becomes a story that can take us out and send us consistently into reptile brain. And often reptile brain, especially when we're running our own story, we go into freeze, especially if we're feeling overwhelmed or scared. We can go into the freeze reaction. And life is really uncomfortable when we're in fight, flight, or freeze. But when we add those words, when we pull back, what happens is we actually, instead of slipping into the reptile brain, that's in the back part of the brain, we actually are moving forward into the frontal lobe, the forebrain. And the frontal lobe is where the empathy center of the brain is and the observer part of the brain is. Oh, I can see the bigger picture. Oh, this is what's really going on. I'm in my story, or maybe this is just the bigger picture. And what's really exciting is the human species is moving from living in our reptile brain, which again, studies have showed people that have dealt with PTSD, people who've been in physical survival, they spend much more time in the reptile brain because they have to. They've had to fight for their life in one way or another. Whereas people that have had it easier, such as myself, we spend more time in our frontal lobe. And each generation further removed from war or really harsh circumstances, their synapses fire more quickly and more often in the frontal lobe. And the human species is moving from reacting out of fear into learning to thrive and to see the bigger picture and to live more in a place of empathy.
I'd like to add to that. We have a favorite quote from one of the spiritual masters, Krishnamurti, which is that the highest form of intelligence is the ability to observe without evaluation. So those evaluations, when we're telling ourselves things that create fear or create anger or create sadness, when we're telling ourselves those things, that's when, like Scott said, we trigger that reptilian brain. But when we can take a step back and recognize that the thought is not necessarily true, we just question that thought. And if you're familiar with the work of Byron Katie, her entire work is about questioning thoughts, and she liberates people from all kinds of crazy trauma and patterns they've been stuck in all their lives, simply by deeply, deeply questioning their thoughts, asking, is it true? And she goes deep into that inquiry, is it true? So this is a very quick form of questioning, is that true? And it helps us go, oh, okay, well, I've allowed myself to believe that something is true. And it's not necessarily true. And simply putting that question in is what allows us to be in our frontal lobes of the brain, where we've gone out of a reaction and into observation, and again, out of a reaction and into the ability to respond from a place of consciousness. So it's why it's the highest form of intelligence is to be able to observe without evaluation. And I can look up the exact quote, and I'll write it in the chat for all of you.
Speaking of writing in the chat, I really want to thank Sharon Hinckley for kind of putting our key little thoughts or teachings into the chat. That's really, I love how you do that, Sharon. So everybody, again, remember you'll find the chat boxes if you take your cursor all the way down to the bottom, just a teeny bit to the right. So yeah, our thoughts are often not true. But what is true always is what we're feeling, and our needs and our values. And to talk about that, I turn it back over to my partner, Katrina.
I put it in the chat box, is the ability to observe without evaluation is the highest form of intelligence. Just that simple. All right. And so we noticed when we looked at the first thought, that first thought that we ran, in comparison to the second thought, that there were different feelings in our bodies. And in the teaching of nonviolent communication, which is really at the foundation of the work that we do in Love Coach Academy, there's an understanding around the role that our emotions play in our lives as a guidance system, as a form of intelligence. And so we do spend a lot of time looking at, okay, what am I feeling? What am I feeling in a sensual way in my body, physical way in my body, but also what are the emotions that are present? Because it's a form of information that helps us see what we're driven to create in our lives. And so the emotions point to this whole body of frequencies that are called universal needs. So I want to just bring those in side by side because they're so related. The universal needs are easiest to think of if you just consider, like, what are the things that make life more wonderful, right? So friendship, love, connection, intimacy. I'd love to see in the chat box if you would point out what are those qualities that make life wonderful? What are those things that we seek to attain? Warmth, beauty, adventure, kindness, consideration, understanding. So these are the qualities of universal needs.
Katrina, did you bring up the because it's not showing on the doc, isn't showing to us.
I have not. Were you expecting me to do that?
Oh no, I'll be happy to do it. So you want to bring up? I got thrown and you said feelings and needs by each other. So I thought maybe you had a way of bringing them up. So you want to bring up? You want me to bring up the universal human needs first?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
Okay. There we go.
Yeah. So I saw Sharon said rest as a need. So if you think about what are the qualities that are really essential to have a happy, healthy life, these are a lot of the qualities that are going to come up, right? Need for intimacy, harmony, companionship, closeness, autonomy, shelter, right? So this is the list of all of the needs that have been recognized by people who have studied this work and gone, okay, what is it that drives us all into action? What is it that what are the considerations that drive us to making some kind of a choice? Whether that choice is a communication, whether it is an action that we take, what's underlying that? What motivates that? So these universal needs are what motivate all of action. And then the relationship between these and emotions is that when these needs are met, we have pleasant feelings. And when they're not met to the degree that we'd like them to be, we have discomfort or unpleasant feelings. And so that's where, again, our emotions have information that help us understand what it is we're seeking to accomplish. And then by understanding that, we can bring a conscious strategy to it. Otherwise, if we don't know what's driving us, we will bring an unconscious strategy to try and meet that need. So oftentimes these thoughts that arise, like whatever thought you were telling yourself, it's actually an unconscious strategy to try and meet a need. Everything we do, again, is seeking to try and meet a need. So I wanted to play around with some of these thoughts, some of these critical thoughts that we tell ourselves. And you don't need to necessarily come up with one that's personal to you, but perhaps we could look at a critical thought that somebody might say to themselves and use that as an exploration around how thoughts connect to feelings and needs. So I'm just wondering if there's somebody who might want to suggest a particular critical thought that we could work with. So you could raise your hand or put it in the chat box. Linda's got one. And Wendy, I think you raised your hand too.
I was just going to say, might it be interesting to take the original painful thought that Scott had us consider, and I don't know if everybody can see the feelings and need sheet or if they have access to that, but are you going to have us try and choose what need we're trying to meet with that thought?
Sure. I thought I would do a demonstration first based on one that we can all do together, and then have each of you work with your own.
Sorry, I'm ahead of you.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, so I'll just choose one fairly randomly. So I could be telling myself the thought that I'm too fat. I'm too fat. I need to lose weight. That could be a thought that I'm running that has pain to it. Right? So if I'm thinking this thought, what kind of emotions might be coming up? We can put it in the chat box or raise your hand.
I see Luciana. So Luciana, you're unmuted.
Yeah, I feel like shit. I mean, like I judge everything in relation to that. Then have the thought I don't deserve because I'm too fat.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not attractive. I'm ugly. I mean, it just
spins some other judgmental thoughts is what I'm hearing.
So much, yeah.
Thank you. And so I hear underneath that maybe sadness.
Yes.
And frustration.
Self-loathing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, frustration. Hopelessness.
Mm-hmm. Hopelessness. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe fatigue with all those thoughts.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So this is the list of emotions. These are the kinds of things that come up, right? That indicate that we have some kind of a need that's not fully met.
Disconnected from myself.
Mm-hmm. Disconnected.
And from divine.
Mm-hmm.
Embarrassed, vulnerable. I mean,
yep.
Agitated. It's, wow, afraid that I'll never get over this, because I have this thought, and I am physically in this condition, and a lot of pain. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So with this thought, I'm too fat. There's a whole bunch of emotions that can come up. And as you pointed out, it can spin into other thoughts as well and just continue spinning, and the reptile takes over. Yeah. And what are the needs that are underneath that? What needs are crying out? Maybe Scott, you can bring up the needs sheet again, and we can have somebody explore what needs are underneath that. And I don't know, Scott, if you can see when people are raising their hands in this mode or not.
I can flip around. So if anybody's raising their hand, just give me a moment to find you, because I can see 4 of you at a time. Anybody want to share what needs you think might be up if you're writing the thought that I'm overweight? I'm too fat? Anybody want to share which need?
I saw Judy put up acceptance. You got someone talking?
Oh, I see Sharon. Sharon,
okay.
You're up.
I would think that a need would be to feel comfortable and at ease in your body.
Mm-hmm. Yep, ease and comfort. Those needs would be present. Mm-hmm. Healing, I see from Judy. Yeah. And what if you connect your weight with your attractiveness, sexual expression, acceptance, I see. And if you're connecting your weight to your ability to be loved and to have intimacy and connection, right? All of a sudden, a bunch of these needs are going to flare up.
Respect, self-worth.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right? So we can see how one thought, when really held as true, is going to weave a whole misery go round of emotions, of needs, and of other thoughts that are related to it that can cycle into a downward place. What we can do, of course, is we can address the need. You know, I'd like to be healthy. I'd like to be in shape. We can do things to it. I'd like connection. And we can create strategies to meet those needs. And for sake of this exercise, let's go back to the original thought and notice, oh, I'm in my story that I'm too fat, right? I'm in my story that I'm too fat. You know what? If I went to India, I'd be the perfect size. Right?
Well,
You go to another culture.
Or
What's
if you
that?
lived in the 18th century. In the 18th century, well-rounded women were gorgeous, and
Right.
thin women were considered, almost cast aside because they weren't good for breeding.
Mm-hmm.
So
having a little bit more weight can be really good for hormonal balance. It might actually be that your body has put you at that weight because it's the healthiest weight for you.
yeah.
There's all kinds of ways that we can question that thought, right? So I'm in my story that I'm too fat. So I just want you to sit with, if I recognize I'm in my story that I'm too fat, how many of the emotions have been comforted? Right? Do you feel a little more accepting of yourself? A little more acceptance? A little stronger? I see, Lisana, it looked like you wanted to say something. Let's see if we can unmute you. There we go.
It's like, sort of like what's happening is, well, but I know I'm living in this culture. So it's like putting the clock ahead when you're chronically late, but you already know you put the clock ahead. So somehow I'm not wrapping my brain around the examples of, in India or, in another century. So can you deepen this, please, a little bit more?
Mm-hmm. So what I'm hearing is that the thought has a really strong grip on you. In this particular example, it's much easier to have the first sentence than the, oh, I'm in my story that.
Yeah.
The story that your mind is just saying, well, no, it's true.
Yes. Yeah, you're right. You're right.
So the challenge here is to do enough of a deep dive inquiry to recognize that is a story. To recognize that in other cultures, there's different stories. There are that having what this culture might say is too much weight just isn't true in other cultures. It might be that it's actually healthy, and our culture is just totally backwards around weight.
Using this example of fat for the most part is a judgmental word.
Mm-hmm.
So just I'm fat, I'm judging myself, and I'm then assuming that the world sees me as fat, and I'm putting myself in the prison that I'm fat, and I'm judging myself for it, and the world is in agreement with that, right? See how it escalates and escalates? Whereas most people who look at me, if I'm perceiving that I'm fat, they don't see a fat person, they see fat, right? And so just that distinction, noticing look at how I'm judging myself through this word. Look at the power of a word that and how it changes the way that I perceive I'm being perceived, as well as how I perceive myself.
So, okay, I clearly have body image issues. I grew up with those. My body does not have the shape that is valued in the United States. And so, yes, it's an ingrained, I bought into the judgment that I don't fit in, into what's considered beautiful or attractive or even okay. So to because what you're helping me see is just how ingrained that is, that I truly have believed it for now 60 years.
Wow.
So I clearly want to get past that. You know, it's like that doesn't help me with self-connection, doesn't help me with healing, with intimacy, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that deep inquiry, more on that, please. Thank you.
One thing I want to say is that it's a great sign already that you can see that it's a story that you bought into. That's one step removed from taking it as truth. Another thing that I'm hearing is it's a story that you bought into and you've believed in a long time. So there's even like an identity investment when we believed in something for a long time. And it means it takes that much more commitment to be able to release that thought. There's a lot of work that can be done to help you release the thought. And I want to just take a moment with this and then go back into the foundational stuff because it is a bit of a tangent from the foundations of thoughts, feelings, needs, and working into the next pieces that we're doing. And what you're saying is so true for so many people that we come to believe a thought, we anchor it for a long time, and then it can be really stubborn. It can take a while to extract it. So there's forms of questioning it. I just notice as I look at you, I see like this lovely woman. So that sentence is not what came to mind at all for me. So I see a lovely woman, and one piece of work that, and by the way, I was 35 pounds heavier at one point. And I did a lot of work on myself, looking in the mirror, smiling, saying, I love you, dancing, body, I love you, eyes, I love you, face, I love you, just doing a lot of self-love practice in my commitment to reshape my thoughts about myself. So sometimes there's a really just deep practice that needs to be done to go, okay, I'm in a story and it's a really stubborn one, to be able to release it. And once you can release it, all kinds of emotions and feelings of unmet needs get released with that story. So that's the liberation. You recognize, oh, I feel beautiful and secure and loved because I love myself. And so the emotions, the needs become addressed by being able to really pull that out at the root and fill it in with the self-love and self-appreciation.
And bringing it back to kind of the needs and the practice, still staying with the example of I believe that I'm fat. When we identify which of our needs are not being met by that thought. So I'm just going to pick one, respect. Okay, let's just say respect. And I see Luciana nodding her head. When we identify a need or a value, I like calling them values, a value, okay, I have a value for respect. And my value for respect is diminished every time I run the story that I'm fat. And so now we have an opportunity to go, where do I want to put my attention? Do I want to put my attention on my story that I'm fat? Or do I want to put my attention on, underneath it, my value for respect? That I have an important value for respect. And there's a wonderful teaching called the beauty of the unmet need. And when we have an unmet need, if we can get in touch with that need itself, not our deficiency thought about it, but the need itself, the need is always beautiful. Every one of the words on this list, I'm going to bring the list back up again, this list of universal human needs, every one of these words are beautiful. They're powerful. They're what we live for. We live to experience these needs. In fact, every one of these words, anything you do in your life is an attempt to get one or more of these words met in a certain way. Now, it's human nature to focus on our deficiency and to run the story of how our need for choice or appreciation or whatever it is hasn't been met. We spend so much time focusing on what hasn't happened in our life. But when we identify which of these words is at the core of our unhappiness, I'm unhappy because I didn't get the appreciation I wanted from my wife, then we can drop into the beauty and the value of appreciation itself. Wow, appreciation's important to me. Maybe my wife didn't give it to me the way I wanted. I'm going to give it to myself. Or I'm going to ask for more appreciation. And that's how we turn it all around. That's why this is such an incredibly useful practice, to go from what's the story to what are the fundamental needs and values underneath the story that are important to me. Does that make sense to everybody? Al? Was that raising your hand, I agree, or raising your hand, you'd like to speak?
Yeah, I had a comment question.
Okay, you're up.
I'm getting an echo. Is there a way to stop that?
I'm not hearing that echo, so I'm not. Oops, but now I can't hear you. And now I can't hear Scott.
Al, go ahead. I muted myself in case the echo was coming from my own system. So go ahead, Al. Let's just hear what your thought is.
With this example of, I'm sorry, it's driving me insane. Can you?
Do you want to put
go to my other picture?
Write it in the chat box.
I know what's going on. Write it in the other picture.
It looks like you're on there twice, Al, where you logged in with your computer and your phone or something like that.
If you could go to my phone, then it'll work.
Okay, so
when this happens in our meetings, sometimes we just log out of the one and stay on with the other.
Yeah, Al, why don't you go ahead and log out of one, stay in the other, and then when you come back in, you can either come back in and we'll ask you, or you can put into the chat box your comment or your question. Oh, good, he logged out. Okay, let's try again. All right, let's try again.
All right, apologies for that. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, good. I guess the example of the weight, I do understand what you're saying about the body image thing, but I'm having a bit of a trouble using that as a kind of a clean example, because health is also an issue. I mean, with me personally, I lost both of my siblings to health problems that were related to weight. Probably not the core issues, but they were morbidly obese, and so it's to me, that is one of the motivators that has got me to, do yoga and exercise and so forth. And so it's kind of beyond, just body image. Certainly I know, heavy people who are healthy, and I know thin people who are unhealthy, but it's just, it's hard for that to sit well with me when one of the great motivators for me regarding weight is, seeing something, people I have loved, pass away very directly from health issues regarding that. So, I mean, I see the connection. I mean, if you get in a loop where you're not, where you're just shaming yourself, that cannot, that is going into the reptile brain, and it needs to be brought forward. And I see that, but there's also value in the motivation of wanting to be healthy.
So thank you for sharing that. And I hear that this particular example has a really strong personal impact on you because of your history. So I really want to acknowledge that. And again, I would say that if we get in touch with the unmet needs by being, and you're using the example of obese, so now we've really escalated when people are obese to the degree that they die or have severe health issues. It's kind of a little bit different than the example of just the self-judgment of I'm fat. But even to stay with that for a moment, Al, probably if people get in touch with, okay, which of my values are not being met, my value for health, my value for safety, my value for certainly respect, my value to be able to function in the world. If they made a list of the needs that are not being met by the situation, the longing to get those needs met might be ideally a good incentive to make the necessary changes. When we get in touch with our values, what we value, and which of our values are not being met, it's a strong motivator for change. As a coach, I've worked with a lot of people with addiction issues. And when people finally realize that their addiction and they want to make a change, it's usually when they really feel the impact of values that they have that are not being met. Their value for care for their family, their value for consideration, their value for self-respect, whatever it might be. So again, always when we get in touch with our values at the core, it's a very profound experience. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Katrina.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I appreciate what you're saying, Scott, because our values do bring us back into our heart. Again, it brings us back into what's motivating us. And before we see what's motivating us, it's easy to be in a reactive conditioned response. I saw Paul Sterling, who's also one of our love coaches, said you can go into the shame, blame, and guilt game. And we start to, using shame, blame, and guilt to motivate ourselves to make change. Whereas, especially in this example, if we're using shame, blame, and guilt, they tend to be such a painful, heavy emotion that it perpetuates eating and not exercising. And so it's a great example of how that reactive way of automatically responding doesn't actually give us the results we want. But when we can look at the precious value, whether it's health and well-being or whether it's respect, then we're actually coming back into our hearts and coming back into looking at, well, how can I take a step forward that really honors this precious value that I have? And so that's what we want to explore next, as we look at whatever story we've been running in our head. Let's look underneath it to see what's the emotional impact of that story and what precious needs are we seeking to meet. All right, so we want to bring some consciousness to whatever story we've been running. And Scott, I'm going to ask you, because we can't do the two side by side, let's just put the needs up, because the needs are what are going to drive our action. This is really the values. The emotions are pointing to this, but if we have to choose one over the other, this is again the part that motivates us.
So to be clear, go back to the painful thought that you all ran at the beginning of our exercise, and underneath that painful thought, which of these words can you find? These might be the words that aren't being met by the painful thought. These are the words that you're longing for. So which of these words can you find inside that painful thought?
Right. I'm wondering if everyone's had enough time. I'm guessing people have. Yeah, yeah. I'd love to hear some of the insights. What have you noticed are values that you hold dear, that you're longing to have met? That might be expressed in this thought that you've been running.
And you can put it in the chat box, or if anybody wants to raise their hand, again, you don't have to tell us the painful thought, but just which of the needs were at the heart of thought. I'm wondering if anybody would be willing to do that. I'm wondering, oh good, Al. You're unmuted.
What I noticed is this was something that was running through my head today, and I realized that what was going on is there was a fear that what was going through my head that could have been an experience that was good. I was afraid that it wouldn't happen again. And when I saw this needs list, what I realized is I was afraid that this wouldn't happen again. Like it was a one-time experience that I passed up. And it sort of helped me see, oh, I was just afraid it might not happen again. And in doing so, I was shutting myself down to being open to other experiences.
Beautiful. I love that insight. I love how going through this process and looking at the needs have brought you through to recognizing another story. Uh-oh, what if it doesn't happen again? Which you can see has blocked you. So I hear immediately some release and some freedom simply by identifying that value. That's great. Thank you. Who else would like to share?
Anybody else wanting to share in the group? I can read from the chat box. I appreciate, one person wrote understanding, safety, acceptance, significance, priority, and connection. Another person wrote acceptance, security, so many other needs. And one person pointed out that within one of the categories, there were many, 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 many variations. And I'm glad that somebody wrote that. Thank you. Because sometimes it's like, oh my God, yeah, it's just so many different levels of meaning of life or connection are what came up for me. So it's again, hopefully this is all helping us to become more conscious about who we are. This is building our emotional intelligence muscles because we're self-reflecting. Somebody else just wrote acceptance, equality, harmony, and balance.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not going to call on anybody, but by raise of hands, who's finding this helpful in learning about yourself and being able to go deeper into that painful thought? Awesome. Yay. You just met my need for reassurance. This works. The class is working.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
So as we look at the needs that we're seeking to meet, again, it helps us to bring our mind into the ability to create a conscious strategy about it. The unconscious strategy is to run the thought over and over and to feel the effects of the thought. Now we can go, oh, this is what we're longing for. And so now you can, it is an improved thought to go, oh, I'm longing for understanding, safety, acceptance, significance, to be a priority, and for connection. That is an improved thought from the prior one. And with that, you can start to look at strategies. You can also start to recognize, where is it that I'm already receiving understanding, safety, acceptance, significance, priority, and connection, or equality, harmony, balance, security. It can be really helpful. Scott had talked about celebrating the beauty of a need. When we experience something is not met, it can be very helpful to also look at, the part of the cup that's full, to see where it is met, just to remind ourselves not everything's lost, right? It's not met to the degree we want it to be, but let's also acknowledge where it is met. And just that acknowledgement it's a little energy boost, right? It's that little moment of gratitude to be able to recognize where our needs are met. And then with each one of these, you can start to look at what form of action might you request from someone in your life that could help you to meet these needs. You know, there's acceptance looks different to different people. Equality looks different to different people. And so maybe there's a particular something that you're looking for that would meet that need. And so you can offer that, because it might be that the other person in this scenario isn't even aware that this is something that you'd like. So a little bit of education can help make the difference. So the next piece that we're looking at in our foundations are our actions. And so I wanted to go into how once we understand our needs, we can look to find what kind of strategy could we use to meet our needs. But we really, really want to be open to the possibility that our first strategy is not necessarily the strategy that's going to work. So that when we make a request, we're doing it from a place of longing as opposed to demand. When we can share our longings, it's very connecting with other people. If we share it as, well, you need to do this for me to be happy, it's disconnecting, right? So if we can share it as a longing, with a real vulnerability around, you know, these are the feelings that are coming up. This is the need I have, and this is a way that the need could be met. There's more of an invitation and awareness that grows, while not making the other person responsible for our emotions or for our needs.
There's a wonderful little way to go within yourself to determine when you're making a request of somebody, if it's a request or a demand. And there's a simple question you can ask yourself: how willing to hear no am I? If I'm not willing to hear no, no matter how diplomatic or how nicey nice I put it, it has the energy of demand. But if I'm really willing to hear no, then it's much more likely to really have the field of energy, the feeling of a request.
Mm-hmm. Do you want to pull up the that foundations sheet again, Scott?
Sure. There we go.
Right. So as we're looking at our actions again are motivated. Look to see, are they motivated by conscious connection to your needs and the needs of those who will be impacted by your choices? So again, as you're looking to make a request to another person, you know, if it's an easy thing for them to do, then they're likely to say yes and to fulfill it. If it's a challenging thing that they want to do, then they might be willing to say yes and attempt to fulfill it. And it might be that whatever it is you request, for some reason, doesn't work for them. It might be that one of their needs would not be met by saying yes. And so there's a place for inquiry. You know, if we say, you know, I'd love for you to open the door for me when we walk into a place, the person says, well, I'm not willing to do that. We may not be cognizant that they have a shoulder injury. We just don't know what it is that would have somebody deny our request. But rather than making that, well, you don't love me, you don't care about me, what we want to do is go into curiosity and to start to understand what need of theirs may not be met by saying yes to our request. So again, inside of the being conscious of our actions, we're really checking in to see, are my actions not only taking into consideration my awareness around my own needs, but am I also acting in a way that shows consideration for the needs of the other person, as much as I'm able to see the needs of the other person? So much of the work that we do in Love Coach Academy and in Compassionate Connections is about deeply understanding the needs that are motivating us and the needs that are motivating others, so that we can find that place of juicy yes, that place of win-win. When we find those solutions, then those are the ones that last well into the future, right? Because both people are naturally motivated. So that was one of the pieces around actions, and I don't have them memorized. So let me flip back up there to see what the second piece said.
Back to the
back to the
foundations.
sheet. Yes. I appreciate what Laura said. If they're getting triggered, do your best to pivot into empathy with them. Exactly. Rather than that, I don't, oh, you don't love me, you don't care, to be able to empathize with what feelings are rising for that person, what needs are rising. So thank you, Laura. And then the second question was, are your actions motivated by love, care, and connection? Not only for the other, but also for yourself. Are you taking action that take both of you into account? Or do you notice that you're in a triggered place? Right? And if you're in a triggered place, our real coaching to you is slow down. The acting from a place of trigger never makes things better. So we want to slow down so we can get out of the reptile brain and back into the frontal lobes, again, where we can make choices that are conscious and loving, as opposed to reactive and potentially hurtful, right? Reptilian brain's going to go into fight, flight, freeze. Those do not work for resolving conflict.
And speed is absolutely everything. When we slow down, we can become conscious. It's all about, are we going to be conscious and coming from our frontal lobe where we're in awareness, or are we going to be unconscious where we're in reptile brain survival? And so learning to slow down, especially if you're in with another person and you guys are beginning to trigger each other. We won't do it today, but there's a whole thing that we teach about taking connected timeouts. And at this point, every couple I work with, usually the first session, I teach that practice. It's just essential to learn how to slow it down, go back into connection. Because really what happens is when people get into fights, it ultimately becomes very rarely about the painful part. The toxicity isn't even about the difference. The toxicity is how we express ourselves about the difference. That's when we start saying things that are hurtful. And then we start defending ourselves. It's funny as a coach, everybody is always just defending themselves. The problem is that we experience a person's defense as an attack.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Did you have something, Paul?
Paul, you are unmuted. And as far as I know, Paul is a brilliant coach, big part of Love Coach Academy, and an author. And I really appreciate Paul's humility. Here's this amazing coach, makes his living coaching people. And he's like right in there being honest about his stuff and what came up for him. So I just want to tell you, Paul, I have such respect for your willingness to be a student, given what a wonderful coach you are.
Thank you. We'll see if you still respect me after the next question. Save the respect for after the question. And I did put the question in the chat box because you said that thing about if you're not willing to hear a no, then the request is more of a demand. And I get that. And I also get that there's probably a lot of times I'm making demands and I'm having a really hard time being with the no. So what I want to do is I wanted to hear you and Katrina's insights on dealing with the disappointment of the no, and not leaving, because what I tend to do when I'm in my little boy is I shut down. It's like I hear no and then I just go, I pull away.
I'm sorry.
She's also a brilliant relationship coach, except for when we get together, when we somehow are not nearly as brilliant as we were before. So I want to figure out how to stay present and not go to pulling away, and also be alive with my disappointment.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would love to address that. It's a great, very, very, very pertinent. So there's two pieces. There's, let's say it's Sequoia said no to you. There's what you can do for yourself, and there's what Sequoia can do. And it, again, comes down to the beauty of the unmet need. So let's say you asked Sequoia for a good night massage before going to bed because you're really, really sore and you want a lot of love, and she's just too exhausted to do it. So what Sequoia can, I'm going to talk about what Sequoia can do first, then I'll talk about what you can do, and then I'd love to hear what Katrina has to say. What Sequoia can do is totally acknowledge your uncomfortable feelings. Not go into denial, not try to diminish them, but really acknowledge, wow, I really imagine, I see how disappointed you are. And I see how frustrated you are, and maybe even how hurt you are. And for her to really just be present to your discomfort without trying to change it or without even changing her truth, her integrity, but just being present to how the discomfort that's there. And that's one of the hardest things to do in relationship, because we love people and we want them to feel good. And then if we make a choice that brings about discomfort, now it's Paul's discomfort, you're not responsible for it, but you care. So you show care for his uncomfortable feelings. And again, both of you drop into the beauty of his request. And you know, the desire to be massaged, the desire for nurturing, you know, to meet his need for love, for comfort, for tenderness, for connection. You can acknowledge the beauty of that. You know, thank you for asking. Thank you for asking for the massage. And I love you so much. And I really would love to massage you. I'm just so exhausted. I don't feel like I could give you the quality of care that I would like to. And I so appreciate your courage in asking. I appreciate your desire for touch. I appreciate all the beautiful things that can bring. And wow, let's just mourn together the disappointment. And notice how it's removing the resistance. It's not, you know, it's still leaning in to the beauty of your longing, leaning into the very real discomfort that came up because she can't do it. And she's still connecting with you. She might not be connecting with you in the way that you would like, but she's still connecting with you. And likewise, your job, Paul, is to lean into her, to then feel into your vulnerability of, I noticed that I'm really longing for connection. And massage was my strategy for that. It was something that, you know, I would have helped me to feel connection. So again, we bring it down to the needs. What am I needing? I'm needing connection. I'm needing loving touch. I'm needing nurturing. What are the universal human needs? And we drop down to those needs, as opposed to running stories of she doesn't love me, she doesn't care, or for Sequoia running stories of he's too needy, he wants more than I can give. See, those are all stories that create separation and disconnection. But if we just drop into the beauty of the longing for touch and nurturing, you can lean in together with that. Does that make sense to both of you?
Yeah, and it brings up one more question, if I can add on.
Before the question, I'm curious, Sequoia, does that make sense to you also?
Yes, and I find that is something that I would say I do. However, when I get a response from him that, like, when I'm leaning in, being compassionate and like getting his need and everything, and what I get back is pouty Paul, that actually it frustrates me that I have to then deal with another layer of, another personality layer. Yeah. And then what's the next personality layer? So what I actually he has a question, but what I was feeling boil up in me was conversation about boundaries.
Right.
Like I have a boundary that I'm not going to be pulled into a downward spiral or a misery go round. Mm-hmm. And so that comes up. Question I have is like, well, what if that need and that no turns into stepping into a boundary of like not going into a dark place. I'm gonna say that, and then he has something he wanted to ask. So
okay. I promise we'll get to what you wanted to ask, Paul. Yeah. Let me address what you just said.
Well, this is really important right here. I don't want to step over that because this is, because what I heard, here, translate this, but here's what I heard, is that if it gets uncomfortable, I have a boundary against uncomfort and hearing your feelings and needs.
Wait, you're saying what you heard from
what
me?
I heard, what I thought I heard. So
your interpretation. So first of all, let's slow down. So this is so rich. So first of all, I want to thank Paul and Sequoia. We're going to stay with this. I want to thank you both for being willing to share a very real thing, and I want to slow it down.
We're making Katrina smile.
Well, I just have to say, it really sounds like you guys are like potently in love and relatively newly in relationship that's deeply committed, where you're just gonna like move through all the stuff that you have to move through to find your sweet spot.
Yeah,
that's what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
I can relate to some of the material. Well, so you're in this, both of you are these really strong individuals with mastery in your own realms, really strong sense of self, and you're coming together in this desire to share love. And there's going to be a period of time where you're negotiating for needs. And in that period of time, it's totally natural that pouty Paul and whatever your version of it, we all have that part, right? We all have pissed off Sequoia. Well, so that's the dynamic that happens. But no doubt there are times when Sequoia has a more vulnerable part of herself that also comes through, and you have whatever your dynamic is to that. And so these are just some of the real dynamics that happen when you have two beautifully empowered people come together in a deeply committed love bond who are getting to know each other's needs and getting to see how you negotiate those needs, and coming from a lifetime of having life a certain way, but now you're relating to each other. It's so perfectly natural that you're going to bump heads sometimes, and that when you bump heads, the wounded inner child is going to come up.
Yeah.
Because that's the nature of deeply intimate relationship. So what I want to reassure you is that this is perfectly human, the right place for you to be in your relationship right now. And to remind you not to eternalize it, because with the inner child can go, oh no, it's going to be this way forever, I can't live with this, right? And to eternalize things. And so I just want to remind you that the nature of everything is that it changes, and that you guys you're in this for the long run. You're negotiating needs, and it's challenging to say, yes, I want to totally show up for you, but I don't want to give up me. And that is a process that you're in.
Beautifully stated.
Thank you, Katrina.
Beautifully stated. And Sequoia, I want to say that when that's beginning to happen for you, again, notice that you are moving into your mind. Oh my God, he's stretching my boundaries. Oh my God, he's going into a dark space. Oh my God, he's going into a personality I don't like. So you start noticing your thoughts, and that's where you really want to go into the frontal lobe, empathy for yourself, empathy for Paul. And as Marshall Rosenberg would say, give yourself an emergency dose of self-empathy. an emergency, literally imagine you are giving yourself an emergency dose of self-empathy. And the way I do that, whether it's with my beloved or when I'm working with a client and they begin to spin out, doesn't happen with Emily because she doesn't spin very often. But if I'm working with a client or a friend and they're beginning to spin, and in my mind I'm going, oh shit, I don't want to have to deal with this. That's the first thought, because we're human. Usually our first thought is, oh no, this person's doing what I don't want them to do. So you notice it. Emergency dose of self-empathy. What does that look like? Oh wow, this isn't really what I'm wanting to experience. Can my love for Paul, can my care for this other person trump my personal desire in this moment? Can I find that place inside of me where my love or care for this person, at least for a few minutes, can supersede and trump, not this Trump, but the Trump before he was president, supersede my desire for it to be different. And usually can, because we have big hearts. And so we remember our capacity to love. We remember our capacity to care. And that is the emergency dose of self-empathy. Now, it may also include, I need to set a boundary, right? I think I can give 10 minutes. I think I can give a quality 10 minutes. And by the way, even as a coach, even when people are paying me, there have been times when someone's going off and off and off, I will say, I think I've got about 10 minutes left of being able to give you quality empathy. And then if I can't connect with you and we can't get off the story, I think we need to bring the session to a close in about 10 minutes. But I think I got 10 minutes left in me. So we gauge that boundary within yourself. And then you do your best. You see kind of where you stand. How much can you give? And then you set your boundary. Sweetheart, I think I got about 10 minutes inside of me to really love you up, listen, acknowledge your discomfort, acknowledge your disappointment, acknowledge what's going on. But then honestly, I think after about 10 minutes, I'm going to probably turn into a pumpkin. And so how does that, and that's what I do. And I've given that to a lot of people. And most of the time people say it's helpful. I'm just curious how that lands for you.
Yeah. And I would say most of the time that's what I do.
Awesome.
Not when we're in a business, that's a totally different thing, but that's most of the time, that's what I've done. And we've talked about whether or not my cup gets filled back up, or not.
Yeah.
But I was really bringing that up because what was coming up for me in the conversation was, it's got to do with boundaries also.
Yeah.
I'm
wanting to just for a moment, because there are 11 other people here.
Yeah.
So I just want to check in for a moment and just ask by raise of hands, who's finding this particular example valuable? I'm needing a little reassurance, and also for Paul and you, want to make sure you guys. So are you people good with us spending just 2 or 3 more minutes on this? Is that helpful? Okay. So Paul,
that was a great boundary there, Scott.
Well, wanting to check in, so thank you.
No, I understand. I was getting it, and I noticed for me when I hear boundaries without hearing a conversation earlier about needs, I hear it as a demand.
Mm-hmm.
That I'm going to get my needs met, and it's like I think it's a boundary is the least engaging thing I hear. Because I don't hear the beautiful needs underneath it. I hear it as just, here's my strategy.
Right.
So I might have to retune my ear to hear it as a beautiful need, but it's helpful to me to hear rather than this is a boundary, but here's a need that's not getting met or something. Because
yeah.
Well, so I imagine what's happening when I'm sorry, I keep wanting to call you Sierra.
Sequoia.
Sequoia, thank you.
Like redwood trees, sequoia.
Thank you. Okay, I get it. When Sequoia is expressing a boundary, it is like, warning, warning, my empathy tank is running on so low that if we keep going, Kali might come out. It's a warning system.
Right.
And
And hearing that, Katrina, I can connect to that. Hearing the boundary, I can't, but hearing my empathy tank makes it,
languaging could work for you better.
Easier for me to hear.
Yeah. And what I hear is she's seeking to express a warning that she could get into a reactive place and start communicating in a way that doesn't represent her values. And she's seeking to stop things short of that happening. Short of that. The other piece that I wanted to say is, when that happens, can you trust that some level Sequoia's heard you, and you've made an impression that when she takes space, it's going to work inside of her, that she loves you, she does want you well. She hasn't figured out the solution yet. She may not figure it out for months, but she's working on it. That an impression has been made. Not that you have to drop the conversation for months, but when she's reached that point, an impression has been made, and she's going to walk away and do her self-care. But in that, it's going to run in the background of, well, okay, how are we going to work this out? Because she's in a relationship with you and she loves you.
I will ponder that.
So I think that's a really brilliant piece, Katrina, really brilliant. And so kind of just to wrap up this little piece, because we're almost to our closing time. Sequoia, what you might want to work on again is learning how to balance your need that you call a boundary with Paul's need. And again, if we can lead with, sweetheart, what's my limit? If you got to get in touch with yourself first, what's my limit? But don't lead with a limit, lead with your care. And then maybe even ask, and Paul, can you just take into consideration that for me, I think I can give you a quality 10 minutes. I don't think I can go beyond that. And as my partner, I'm hoping that you can appreciate that I want to give you the best 10 minutes I can. And then beyond that, I need to go take care of myself. How would that land for you, Paul, if she would say something like that?
I don't know, we can try it. I mean, I want to work on myself in this too. It's not like,
Sure.
I want to be careful of it. It's not like she's the most amazing woman and communicator I've ever been with, and we are colliding.
Right. Well, it's all about balance. Right?
At times.
It's about finding the balance and acknowledging each other's needs. So I'm really appreciating you guys. Thank you so much. Yeah, Linda, I'm going to unmute you.
I don't know if it's helpful or not, but something Emily, Scott, your Emily taught me, and that she says to herself in situations like this. Sequoia, I don't know if this is helpful in your situation, but I offer it. Emily put one hand on her heart and one hand on her control center, and she would say quietly to herself repeatedly, "My courage to love you is greater than my fear." And it's something that I use and find comfort in when I feel triggered and I want to protect myself and maybe want to state a boundary in an effort to protect myself. And so I'll just like slow it right down with repeating that to myself and putting my hands on my body in those places to bring some self, I guess, Scott, is it a form of self-compassion?
Yeah, thank you so much for bringing Emily into the room with us. And I'm going to share with her that you did that. That's beautiful. And yeah, it's true. It's like, again, it's a form of self-empathy, self-connection. It's like we can only give to the other to the degree that we can give to ourselves and connect to ourselves. So I think that's brilliant. And I'm just curious, quickly, Sequoia, how does that land for you as a possibility or something like that?
Yep, absolutely.
Awesome. We're at 8:00. So I think I'd just love to quickly open it up and see if anybody has, and I'm really glad we had a chance to have a real life example to work with here. So thank you, Paul and Sequoia. Does anybody have any kind of questions that you really want to have cleared about the class, or about what we worked on today? No? Lusana, I am unmuting you. Okay.
Thank you. I have a question because this was very, very rich. Thank you, everyone. For what arose as a result of what was shared, how will that be addressed? Because I wrote a question. Michaela also made a comment that I would like to have addressed. So I'm wondering about, like, next class, or what's the process? Thank you.
I did see your question, and I'd be happy to respond quickly with what I've used. When somebody makes a request of me, but it has an energy of demand, and it sounds like, that's what's going on, I'll actually just speak to that. And I'll say, it sounds like you're really demanding this of me rather than making a request.
And if they deny it, because I've tried that.
Yeah. Then I might say, well, it doesn't work for me. It doesn't meet my need for, and I identify what my needs are. And so I can't say yes to your request. And if they then are trying to, well, you have to say yes. Well, I'm like, well, then that's a demand, and it's not honoring of my needs. I hear it's deeply important to you. I hear that you have this need. If you want to contribute, you can be in a further dialogue around, well, let's see what I can do that would meet your needs, that honors me. And it might be that you need to set a boundary.
Yeah, and that's part of my learning, huge learning. Yeah, to be able to set boundaries in a loving way, in a compassionate way.
That's a deep skill to learn, for sure. We have a whole course on that.
Yeah. So, and Michaela, I hope you don't mind, but I read you say that you often have a fear of hearing no, which keeps you from asking. I also have that fear. It very, very strongly. So could you address that?
I'd like to say that usually the fear of hearing no is that we interpret no to mean screw you, I don't care about you. We interpret no as a lack of care or a lack of respect. And that's an interpretation to work on. So just really pick 10 times you've heard no, or 5 times you've heard no, or 5 times you fear hearing no, and ask yourself, what does my interpretation of no mean? And a reminder of what Katrina said, oftentimes no is, let's be curious why it's no, not to challenge it. No, because I don't have the energy. No, because I have other plans. No, because I wasn't planning on that. No isn't nearly as personal as people usually take it. So that's my quick answer. We were asked in the chat box if this is being recorded. It is being recorded, and I will post it. I will post it. About half the people in this call are part of our relationship mastery course, which began yesterday, and I'll post it there. I'll also be posting it in the Love Coach Academy membership site. If any of you are not members of the Love Coach Academy membership site, I'm really quickly going to pull up the link where you can do so. It's a wonderful site. The people who belong to that get to participate in all of our live online practice groups. We're probably going to expand to twice a week soon. And the Love Coach Academy membership site also offers 50 videos, 20 webinars, 20 audio podcasts. It's only $12 a month or $90 a year. And it's a really, really wonderful opportunity. And I'm getting the link as we talk.
Wonderful. And then I wanted to say that the piece that we didn't get to on the foundations has to do with watching your heart, watching your state of being, watching your energy field, and really noticing, are you in a place of love and connection? Are you in a place of contraction? Not with judgment, but with awareness. If you're in a place of contraction, you might want to do some self-care. You might want to do some rest and reflection. But really noticing your energy field, right? The heart emits an energy field, and it impacts the people around us. So you want to have awareness of that, and then the practices of gratitude and the practices of building your character strength through acknowledgement and through recognizing where character strengths can help you through life are ways of being able to, we could say, use alchemy to shift our vibrational field. So the piece that we didn't go into is most specifically the character strengths list. And that is a wonderful list to look at when you're working through a challenge. Go, okay, which of these ways of being could help me through the challenge? Or when you're in an upset with another person, to consider, like Paul and Sequoia. Even though you guys go through whatever this challenge is, no doubt you could pause in the middle of the challenge and you could name off at least 3 character strengths and say, even though I'm feeling frustrated right now, I want to acknowledge you for being authentic, for being caring, and for being present with me. And then you can deepen each of those. This is how I see, I see your presence because you're making eye contact and you're breathing with me, and so your presence is just really clear to me and touching my heart. So even in the middle of upset, we can acknowledge people for the beauty that they share in our lives. This is a wonderful way to do emotional alchemy. And again, anytime you're in a challenge, you can look to this to see what quality of being can I bring to the challenge that would empower me here. So that's the very short piece on character strengths I wanted to make sure you get, so that we could complete our loop on that foundations sheet we'd brought out in the beginning.
Thank you so much, Katrina. Thank you very much for your amazing work with us. And the character sheets are in the Relationship Mastery online course group, and also in the Love Coach Academy membership site. In the Love Coach Academy membership, there's membership site. There are also about 40 documents and protocols. It's just a treasure trove library of videos and webinars and documents. It's everything you need to know to have wonderful relationships is inside that membership site. So in the chat box, I put the link where you can learn more about the membership site. And I want to thank everybody for joining us. I want to thank Paul and Sequoia for being so vulnerable. I want to thank Lusana for her awesome participation and questions. Coach Linda for her insight and bringing Emily into the room. And of course, my partner and co-founder of Love Coach Academy, Katrina. And thank you, everybody. And hopefully we'll see the relationship map. Well, actually, we'll see all of you next Monday. How do people like this time, by the way? We moved it to 6:30. And there's been some talk about making it even earlier. Who would like it to be at 6 o'clock Pacific time? If you would prefer 6 o'clock Pacific time, raise your hand. Nobody's raising their hand. If this time is perfect for you, 6:30, raise your, I'm seeing Annie Hobson. You've showed up. There you are, Annie. So Annie's on the East Coast, so you want earlier probably. How many people like 6:30? How many think 6:30 is just perfect? Okay. So we'll kind of talk to a few other people. It'll either be 6 or 6:30 next week. We'll make an announcement. Thank you, everybody. Have a beautiful night.